Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. This is the Self-Control Show, and I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. And here's episode number 3. On this episode, I'm going to talk to you guys about what I consider to be the foundations of developing self-control. So I'd like to start off by kind of defining what I feel self-control means. And that is like another form of self-regulation. It's the ability to manage and control your thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, no matter the circumstance. So really, self-control has a lot to do with and really is rooted in your relationship with yourself. And really, it's more so your relationship to your nervous system. If you don't know, what your nervous system's job is to keep you safe. And in this episode, we're gonna mostly talk about the nervous system and its actual functions. And then we're gonna get into a little bit of how that might show up in your day-to-day life and how you can start to recruit it as an ally instead of basically a control panel of operations that are going on in the background outside of your awareness. So again, your nervous system's job, its only functioning job, is to keep you safe. And really, I want you guys to keep that at the forefront of your mind throughout this whole entire episode. So your nervous system is more or less, and I like to basically explain the science term and then break it down into a more simplistic way to understand it, because I like simple, as cool as fancy words are. So your nervous system is made up of 2 separate branches, and one of those branches being made up of its own 2 separate branches. And that is the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is broken down into the 2 branches. But to keep it simple, I want you guys to think of an upside down stoplight. So green, yellow, and red. Green is one of the branches of the parasympathetic nervous system. It is your ventral vagal complex. That part of your nervous system is responsible for all the good feelings that you feel. Health, growth, restoration, feeling safe, socially connected, joy, love, harmony, flow, all those beautiful feelings and emotions. Then there's yellow, and that is sympathetic. That's the other part of your nervous system. And most of us know sympathetic as the fight or flight response. This gets triggered and activated when you perceive threat, potential threat. You feel stress, anger, anxiety, nervousness. All those feelings are linked up to sympathetic or yellow. And then last, there's red at the very bottom, which is your dorsal complex. And really what this part of your nervous system is responsible for is immobilization. And one more thing I'll add, going back to yellow, sympathetic, that is a mobilizing state. So you want to fight or you want to flee. You want to engage or run away. So going back to red is a freeze, shutdown, or immobilization. This is when, let's say your body experiences too much stress, too much challenge. It is seeing an overwhelming threat, life-threatening. It will go into a red state, which is basically shut down. Again, that's your dorsal part of your system. The thing to know about each of these states is in each state, there are 3 different aspects that will trigger when you're feeling a certain way. And that is, you're going to have a somatic feeling or physical sensation. You're going to have feelings and emotions, and you're also going to have thoughts. So if you're in a state of green or ventral, you're going to have green bodily feelings. You're going to have green emotions like that love, joy, and connection. And you're also going to have green thoughts. Wow, I'm feeling happy, and I'm thinking about all the possibilities that might be for my life and my future. Same thing with yellow. It's like when you're in yellow, you have a yellow lens on and you see the world as yellow. So you might be feeling tightness in your chest as a physical sensation. The feelings that you might have are stress, anxiety, worry, fear. And the thoughts that you might have are, oh my gosh, like, what is that person doing over there? Or what is that person thinking? Or how might they be thinking of me? And then same thing goes for red. When you're feeling red, when you're in dorsal, when you're immobilized, you might have, let's just say the physical sensation would be that clench in the pit of your stomach or the knot in your stomach. And you might be feeling depressed. You might be feeling like you don't want to be around anybody. You want to self-isolate. You might be feeling sad. And then the thoughts are, red thought would be, I'm so sad right now. I'm so depressed. Life sucks. What's the point? All those, the red thoughts and feelings that go along with that state. So what's important about this is, how does your body know and your nervous system know what state to be in? Well, what's going on with you 24/7, 365, whether you're sleeping or whether you're actively walking around awake, is you have this process called neuroception, which is your body's ability to detect threat or safety outside of your conscious awareness. And again, that's the fancy term, but really what you can think of it as is like your radar or your spidey senses. And again, it's something that's going on without you having to even engage it or think about it. And an example of this is like, you don't have to think to breathe. You don't have to think to digest food. You don't have to think to know you're hungry. It just is something that sort of happens. It's like all of a sudden you start to feel like a little cramping in your stomach, and then you kind of get angry and irritable, and you're like, oh, what's going on? And next thing you know, it's like, oh, I'm not angry or irritable. It's like, I'm just hungry. And then, that's hanger, essentially. But all that process happens outside of your unconscious awareness. And the thing about neuroception is each one of us, our brains, our spidey senses, and our nervous system is wired differently based on how we grew up. It could be based on, your socioeconomic status, what gender you are, what race you are, what traumatic experiences you've had in your life. Were you a parentified child? Did you get all your emotional needs met when you were younger? Did you get your physical needs met? Were your parents divorced? Did you move a bunch as a kid? Did you experience any physical illness, emotional abuse? Did you have sick parents, either physically or emotionally? How much rupturing and non-repair did you have at your home? Was your reality denied? All of these things, however small or big for you, play an impact how your nervous system detects safety or threat in your environment. And there's another thing to note about your spidey senses. And what we want to start trying to do is gauge whether or not your reaction to a particular situation is appropriate or is it not appropriate. An example for this is like if someone's coming at me with a weapon or a knife, God forbid, does my body kick into fight or flight, and do I want to fight that person or run away? Probably just run away, because you don't want to get into, weapon fights. But that would be an appropriate response for the situation. Whereas if you're not wired right, let's say you're in a dangerous situation, but your nervous system is not kicking on, your spidey senses aren't telling you to get out of there, well, that's called faulty neuroception. And that's something that through training, we can start to learn how to make new choices. So what kicks us out of green and into yellow or red? Because ideally, we want to spend as much time in as green as possible. Now, that is not actually possible because it's normal and it should be expected to experience the full spectrum of the stoplight, green, yellow, and red. The key is to be able to realize, oh, I'm in yellow, or oh, I'm in red, and then come up with your own way of getting back to green. Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but first, let's talk about what bumps us down the ladder, let's say, or down the stoplight. And those things are triggers or landmines, and landmines are just a real intense trigger. And you can call it trigger, you can call it an emotional activation, whatever feels best for you, I guess. And you can have both, we'll call it good and bad triggers. A bad trigger being you experience a difficult emotion that bumps you into yellow or red, or like, for example, losing your job, getting into a car accident, experiencing high levels of stress. Those things can trigger you down into yellow or red, but you can also be triggered up into green. You can see somebody that you love or somebody that you care about, and that can spark emotions of green, connectedness, joy, happy, all that good stuff. So just to kind of simplify this process, and another important piece to know, that when you go from green to yellow and red, what you're doing is you're actually going from the best hardware that you have in your brain in green, meaning when you're in green, you're in your prefrontal cortex, okay? And what that part of your brain does is all the executive functioning, it's the smart part of your brain. It's your mainframe, let's call it. And again, your executive functioning, it's when you're able to operate at your highest potential self. You're able to make the best decisions for what's good for you right now and what's good for you in your future. Let's just say it's connected to the infinite possibilities of the universe. It's abundant. It is all the goodness. What happens when you experience a trigger, right, and your yellow or red part of your nervous system gets kicked on, is a different part of your brain starts to fire. And that's like the limbic system and your amygdala. And what happens is your prefrontal cortex, or the mainframe, or the green part of your brain, slowly starts to shut off or quickly shuts off. And you get into more of a primal fight or flight, or dorsal response, red response, yellow, red response. And why it's important to note that is a lot of times, again, going back to what we know about our spider senses, is we get kicked out of green into yellow and red outside of our conscious awareness. So a lot of times, if we're not aware to what's going on internally for us and why our nervous system does what it does, we can be in yellow and red and not really know it. And if we are in yellow and red, we don't have the smart part of our brain on. So we're making yellow and red decisions, and we're having yellow and red reactions to situations. And a lot of times when we have those yellow and red reactions, we say things we don't want to, or that we might regret. We make decisions that we don't want to and that we might later regret. And a lot of times there tends to be a lot of guilt and shame around those potential yellow and red decisions. So again, a trigger, an example of this and how your neuroception happens is, let's just say there's a particular person in your life. I know that there are in mine where, if they use a certain tone of voice and have a certain facial expression and they say something like, Jason, all of a sudden for me, my chest clenches up a little bit, my breathing might increase, my heart rate goes up, or my breathing might get a little shallow and my heart rate goes up. And without awareness, I am now in a yellow state. And if I don't have awareness to that, I could say and do things from my yellow state, as opposed to realizing, oh, geez, that person said something, did something, I saw something, my nervous system triggered me into yellow. Oh, I have awareness to that. And once I have awareness to that, then I can bring green back online. Because just noticing and being aware that you're in a different state, that is you engaging your green, your prefrontal cortex, your mainframe, which will allow you to experience that trigger and be with it instead of actually being in it and being hijacked by it. Okay. So one of the real big goals in this training is to understand like the difference of being with a trigger or an activation instead of being in it. And again, being with it is an understanding like, oh, I feel this way about this thing. Is this really happening right now? Or is this my nervous system worried that it might be something similar to a past event? So again, like just because you're experiencing yellow and red, something to note about your nervous system is that it is very good at collecting and keeping data in order to keep you safe. So if you experience something in your past and your body and your nervous system learns that this particular situation is not safe, it puts you in too much yellow and too much red, well, it's going to be constantly scanning scenarios and looking out for situations in your current present now that might resemble past difficult experiences. Knowing that, we need to start to be able to bring green back to situations where we normally would be in yellow and red, and rewiring our responses based on what we know about life now instead of how we felt about certain situations in the past. And this is one of the key things that you will learn in training with me and coaching with me is you get into your past just enough to understand why you are the way that you are, how your neuroception or your radar and your spidey senses got developed, what things trigger you into yellow and red, and how to get back to green and be aware of these things. Because what happens with a lot of situations where we lose self-control, and that the feeling of loss of self-control is we make decisions out of self-regulation where we aren't feeling like we're in control of our thoughts, feelings, emotions. And then we make decisions where maybe if we were in green, we would have chosen differently than rather than being in yellow and red. Now, this was a big aha moment for me because, my own story is, I did a lot of things out of being in yellow and red that I felt were shameful. I was emotionally reactive in my marriage. I spent money trying to make myself feel better. I used substances to cope, and then certain activities online, computer games, video games, all of that stuff. And the big aha for me was realizing that when I would make those decisions that I wasn't super stoked about, because a lot of times those decisions held me back from going towards all of my dreams and my aspirations that I had in my life, is I was just uncomfortable being in yellow and red, and I didn't know how to get myself back to green. And it was like, that was a big aha. And I was like, wow, so you're saying that like all these things that I was doing that were considered bad were just responses to being dysregulated or in yellow and red. And my nervous system, and I just didn't know any of this information. And I didn't understand that all I needed to do was take back my self-control and figure out ways to get back to green for myself. And once the demystification happened for me, all of a sudden there was just like this overwhelming relief and like melting off of shame for the decisions that I had made in the past. Because now that I understood like, oh, this feeling in my chest is just me in yellow, or this feeling in my gut that I get when I'm sad, or like this overwhelming tired when I don't feel like doing something, that's just my body being super smart and shutting me down and bumping me down the ladder or bumping me down the stoplight. And it demystified and it took a lot of the fear out of feelings and why I was feeling a certain way. And like the process is of course we want to start to figure out, okay, man, this thing or this situation or this person or this environment keeps bumping me into yellow and red. So it's like step number one, start to feel your emotions, okay? You start to understand like, hey, emotions are safe. These feelings I get are safe. Nobody's ever died from feeling their feelings. As a matter of fact, Joseph Campbell says, every feeling fully felt is bliss. And I truly believe that. However, there are a lot of people that are slowly dying by not feeling their feelings. Let's be honest here. So what we want to start doing is having better interoception. Okay, that's another fancy term. Again, all that means is having awareness to physical sensations, feelings, and thoughts that are going on inside of us. What is going on physically, like paying attention to that tightness in my chest, paying attention to that feeling in my stomach. When I'm feeling green, where do I feel that? Is it, in my shoulders or in my face, in my head? Like when I'm in those different states, that green, yellow, and red states, where do I feel it? Okay, physically. What do I think about life when I'm in that state? What emotions am I feeling when I'm in that state? And what are my thoughts? And once you're able to start, that interoception, again, it's like an internal report card on like basically what state are you in? And you're able to notice that and increase your ability to notice for yourself. Well, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm feeling this way. I have this physical sensation in my chest. Oh, my breathing is like really shallow. Oh, I'm having these like anxious thoughts, or I'm worried. It's like, oh, I'm just in yellow right now. And it's not something to be afraid of. It's just something to notice. And it's your body telling you something. And the more you're able to pay attention to that, the better you are going to be at regaining self-control, getting back in the green. Here's the problem, especially for men. I don't know about you, but when I grew up, a lot of what is societally and culturally talked about for men is, hey, don't be a baby. Don't show your emotions. Suck it up. Don't embarrass me. Why are you crying? Stop crying. Don't feel that way. A lot of times it's like, hey, somebody else has got it worse than you, so there's no use in complaining. Or always find the positive, right? Toxic positivity, let's say. Shove things aside, numb our feelings. We are just like more or less bombarded with all of these reasons why to not actually do what I just told you to do, was get better at noticing what's going on with your feelings. The idea of having feelings and being vulnerable enough to actually talk about it with somebody isn't really a safe thing for men to do. So what I'm going to tell you to do is to start doing those things, because let's be honest, not doing that hasn't really got you to where you want to be, at least for me. And what I like to refer to this as, and it's kind of like my motto, is like, this is what's called to face the storm. At least for me, this is like that black cloud that would always follow me around everywhere that I went. And you can call it depression, you can call it whatever you want to call it, that heaviness of life that I feel like is just this heaviness that most men just carry around in silence, suffering in silence. And when you finally start to face the storm, to start noticing on what's going on, to start feeling safe, to allow those feelings to be real, as opposed to shoving them down or avoiding them, or to bypassing them with positivity, or invalidate them or numb them with smoking, drinking, watching porn, buying things endlessly online, chasing women, etc. You will start to be able to heal these patterns. So, where most of us lose self-control is when we don't notice the shift in our states from going from green into yellow or red, and we don't pay attention to them for whatever reasons. And the more you can build an internal awareness to what state you're in, you can actually feel those feelings, the more you can actually get in touch with what is it that you need, right? How are you going to regulate your nervous system and get your self-control back online and go from yellow to red? If you're in yellow and you're stressed and you're anxious, well, do you need to just exercise that day? Do you need to take a walk? Do you need to do some deep breathing and do some, meditation or some just mindful breath work? You will start to know in each state what you need to get yourself back to green. And another example would be like, okay, too much yellow. You get bumped into red. You start understanding what red feels like for you. You want to self-isolate. Well, maybe all it is that you need some extra sleep. You've been noticing like, okay, what's going on in my life that now I'm feeling like I'm in red? I've been stressed out so long and I haven't been sleeping. And it's like, okay, I'm going to make an asserted effort the next few days to be sure I get in a 30 to 60 minute nap or multiple 20-minute naps throughout the day. Or I'm going to make sure to drink enough water, etc., etc. Or another example of yellow is like if you're experiencing too much challenge and you're stressed out, it's like, where in my life can I ask for help? Would be a good example of that. Or where in my life can I deload the stress, the mental load? We call that your allostatic load, or the running stress, emotional stress in your life that you carry day to day. How can you delegate tasks that will open more bandwidth up for you? Because here's the thing, the state of your nervous system starts to create the traits of who you are. So in other words, you run across somebody that's, always upset, always stressed out, always anxious. You start to just associate them with just being like a stressed out, anxious person. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, they're just like an anxious person. And it's like, well, to me, all that means is that that person is in a chronic state of yellow and they haven't figured out what they need to feel safe enough to be in green, what they need to process in their past, what support they need in their current environment, what factors in their current environment are keeping them in yellow and not allowing them to get reconnected with green. So again, when you think about, losing self-control and the things that we do to get us back to green, a lot of those things that we do, especially the negative ones, the substance abuses, the emotional reactivity, all of the things that we use to get us back from yellow to green, it's just, and we'll call them coping mechanisms. All that is we are afraid to sit in yellow and red. And, for most people, myself included, that was a thing to do. And when you learn this stuff about your nervous system, all of a sudden, and again, kind of already touched on this, the demystification, the loss of shame allows you to regain agency and control of your life. So, in other words, instead of in the past where you would go into yellow and you would yell, when you develop this and you'd yell to get your point across or whatever the situation was, you start to notice, oh, what state am I in? I'm in yellow. And then that triggers in your brain, oh, I'm in yellow right now. So you can either stop the conversation or you can let the other person know that you're not liking this feeling that you're having. Maybe you should take some time out to get back into green before we had this conversation, or ask them to ask what they're asking in a nicer way, because maybe they are being mean or rude. But two people being mean, two people in yellow, let's just say, don't get you anywhere. So you want to try to be in green as much as you can when it goes to making decisions, when it comes to relational situations, especially with wife or girlfriend, significant partner. You don't want to be making decisions from yellow and red, because those can have lasting damaging effects on your relationship. So again, just to give a brief summary, your three main states of your nervous system, you have green, yellow, and red. You've got ventral, sympathetic, and dorsal. Losing self-control happens when you go from green to yellow or red, and it happens without your awareness. And then you start making decisions from yellow and red, whether that be in the moment, with like a conversation, whether that be to go to a substance to drink because you're not feeling good, or smoke, or use pornography, or buy something online, whatever your quote unquote vices or your coping mechanism, or red, depression. You don't want to be making decisions when you're in those two states. And just learning this, and just learning that it's okay and it's normal and it's your nervous system doing its job, and it's okay to be in yellow and it's okay to be in red, and it doesn't have to last forever. And there are ways to get back to green. There are relationships and help that you can get, that you can form in your life to start building habits and to start building basically stop holds for yourself along the way, so that you can start rewiring your neural pathways. The cool part about your brain is we all have this thing, it's called neuroplasticity. The neuroplasticity, and that is your brain's ability to bend and to change, but to not give all at one time. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever had like an epiphany, where it's just like, or a paradigm shift in your life, right? Where you have like this new way of looking at life. But like, have you ever like been to a seminar or like watched a great YouTube video where it's just like, oh, you kind of like get all the good feels, and it's like, oh yeah, like life could be different like this. And it's like, that's great. And you feel like everything could change, but your life just doesn't change from watching YouTube videos or reading quotes on Instagram. You have the potential to change, but it doesn't happen all at once. It happens little by little. It's like, think about this. It's like you have a defined path that's pretty carved out, right? Neuroplasticity allows you to deviate from that path and start making new paths. Now, that's not to say that you can't go back to your old path, but it opens the door to new paths. And like, I think what's the most important thing about this idea and understanding your nervous system, and it's like your control panel to your body. Like when you think about it, like if you were to drive a car, right? Let's just say like we were driving our car, right? But we didn't know how it worked. We didn't know that the steering wheel made it go left and right, the gas pedal made it go faster, the brake made it go slower. We didn't know what the check engine light was, and we were just like trying to drive our cars without any understanding of how they worked. Well, it's like everybody would be way too terrified to drive and nobody would drive. It's like that is the same thing about our, like, you can apply that to our nervous systems. It's like most of us don't understand why we feel the way that we feel, and what that means, and how to get back to a green state and feel like they're back in control. And just simply understanding this and understanding your control panel, which is your nervous system of your body, is like a huge thing that if everybody knew about and had awareness to, there would be way less of the things that took us out, let's just say. So, what's important to know about your nervous system and us as humans is we are biologically wired for connection, okay? And I hate to say it for you avoidant people out there, but it's just the truth. And the thing is like we want high quality connection. We want to connect with safe people that can be with us, that can help us. It's called co-regulate instead of self-regulate, or get our self-control back online. You know, when you hang, like for example, when you hang out with a great friend and you meet up with them, it's like all of a sudden, once you're in their presence, you get that great feeling no matter how you were feeling throughout the day. That's a great example of what co-regulation is, and it is a biological imperative for us as human beings. And you know, the thing about yellow and red is the closer you get to red, the more you want to isolate, the more you want a lone wolf, the more you want to not need people. So again, understanding your nervous system is trying to keep you safe on one hand, and then understanding also what it needs to feel like to get back to green. So this is a lot of information, and there's quite frankly a lot more to cover. But this is a good foundation for just basically understanding, your brain's, your body's control panel, your nervous system. This is really the foundation of what self-control is. If you're more of a visual learner, I do have a free guide that basically covers all of this stuff. You can find that at jasonschnitzercoaching.com. There'll be a link to download that free guide in the show notes. So don't worry about if you don't know how to spell my last name. And for people that are interested in working with me, I do offer one-on-one training with regards to reclaiming control. It's a 12-week program where we work one-on-one once a week for 60 minutes, ongoing tech support the whole time. And what we do is we have a customized plan to help you get control back over your life so you can stop doing the things that you're doing that you feel are taking you out, and then give you more energy to work forward and move forward towards the goals and all the things that you want to do, whether that be in your relationships, in your business to create more wealth, or your own personal health. Because I don't know about you, it's always difficult to make those decisions on a daily basis to get and work out what you put in your mouth for your diet, etc. So again, all that information can be found in the show notes or at jasonschnitzercoaching.com. And I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast on nervous system, self-control, training foundations, and I'll catch you next time.